We have two roundtables and one panel presentations. And we are looking forward to gaining some insights into what happened and how governments, nonprofits, and all of us dealt with the situation in the past 2 years. So Stephen, as my co-organizer, co-chair of this symposium, do you want to say a few words?
Thank you, Marina. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I really appreciate it. I just echo what Marina said. We have a great group, two roundtables and a set of papers, and one squeezed in the middle. And I think all of them are covering a large number of possible topics, diversity in terms of the content of those topics. And I think the presentational formats are going to be excellent as well. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
Gary, do you want to start?
Okay, very good. Yeah, thank you, Mira. First of all, good morning, everybody. Welcome. I get very excited about the HR ASPA Annual Symposium. So many years, so many great speakers. I'm Gary Roberts. I'm an HR Council, ASPA Council member, MPA Program Director at Regent, and I'm excited about celebrating public service and public servants. And again, this is what ASPA is all about. We need to cultivate leadership, servant leadership, character, and competence. That's what it's all about. And the real challenges that we face today too with COVID is that COVID is not over. COVID has ongoing negative effects to public administrators, to our society in general. If you look at it, how we deliver service has changed dramatically. We're much more online, very fact that we're here in this virtual summit. The way we budget, it's adversely affected budgets. And of course, from an HR standpoint, it has been very significant in terms of its adverse effect. If you look at staffing levels in terms of local governments, before COVID till now, they've lost 650,000 governmental employees. And in fact, it makes it even worse because applications are down by 25 to 40% to local and state governments. And a recent survey showed that the people who are left, 78% report increased workload and burnout, and over half of them are thinking about leaving. So this is, where having leadership that addresses this issue proactively is so vital for the success of public administrators and, of course, promoting the public interest. And so we're really blessed here to have 4 outstanding public administrators who are out there doing it. So I'm going to introduce them in their order of speaking. Our first panelist and speaker is Laura Fitzpatrick, who's the Deputy City Manager of Chesapeake. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration from SUNY Buffalo, as well as a Master of Public Administration from the gold standard in terms of MPAs, the University of Kansas. She's very active in ICMA, leadership class of 2009 graduate, credentialed ICM manager since 2011, served on the ICMA Board of Directors in the Southeast region from 2018 to 2021. She had prior tours of duty in Manassas, Virginia, Rio Rancho, New Mexico, and Hampton, Virginia. And Laura is a skilled public administrator. She's a generalist. She's worked across the broad range of services and has a specialty in collaborative arrangements and communication and building up relations with the community. Our second panelist is Brian Thrower. Brian is the town manager for Crewe, Virginia. Prior to that, he had tours of duty in Emporia, Virginia, as well as Smithfield, Virginia. He also had positions in Lynchburg, Virginia, and Charlotte, North Carolina. And Brian has a BA degree in political science from, I think, Virginia Tech, and a master's degree from Virginia Tech as well. And in his off time, he likes to run like I do. Then our third panelist is Professor Sam Gaston. Sam is an amazing person, and one of his claims to fame is being a city manager of Mountain Brook, Alabama for 29 years. which is really a tremendous achievement, especially when the average tenure of a city manager is only 4. He's accomplished. He's been past president and executive board member of the ICMA. He was the City County Management Association president. He was also the Administrator of the Year for the Greater Birmingham chapter of HR ASPA. Professor Gaston was also ICMA Teacher of the Year. He's got a BA in Planning and an MPA from Auburn. He also serves as a practitioner residence at Regent University. And then our final panelist, last but not least, is Dr. Ed Daly, who now is current county manager of Winchester, Virginia, who's had 35 years of experience as a city manager in Dodge City, Kansas, Winchester, Virginia, and Hopewell, Virginia. And also Ed is a senior advisor for ICMA and the Virginia Local Government Management Association. He's a member of the National Academy of Public Administration, a Distinguished Service Award winner from the Virginia Local Government Management Association and ICMA, and a GISPIA graduate, the Graduate School of Public International Affairs from the University of Pittsburgh. Also is DPA from USC and served our country as a Marine. So I'm looking forward to hearing from the panelists. If the panelists could basically just 5 minutes or so and in terms of remarks, and then we will open it up to questions. So Laura, go ahead, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts, for the introduction. I'm pleased to be here this morning with my colleagues and with all of you. I was going to just share some reflections in these 5 minutes about my experience in public administration in local government during the pandemic. And I have 2 aspects to share. One is from the financial end of things regarding the stimulus funds we received under the Trump administration at the beginning of the pandemic, and then under the Biden administration starting last summer. It was an interesting process, an interesting project to manage. We're still managing it. And then the other item that I wanted to discuss is something that Dr. Roberts was alluding to in his comments about the state of the workforce in society right now and its impacts in local government. And we are still figuring that out, particularly related to telework. So first, the stimulus funds. The city of Chesapeake received $43 million of stimulus funds from the federal government under the CARES Act in summer of 2020. And this was a project to manage on top of everyone's daily duties. And one of the things that was challenging about it is, as we've all experienced, the guidance from the federal government was evolving. And we were trying to spend the funds by a deadline, which was very, very short when the first guidance was issued. And we put a call out to city government, to the departments on what projects they thought would be eligible, which was a good thing, but it ended up creating a lot of work, and we were trying to figure out things as we navigated it. And it was really important that we spent things in a way that we were in compliance with all the federal rules, and the rules were changing. When we got the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act funds, we took a much different approach. Now, we had the benefit of the experience with CARES. Instead of putting a call out to the organization, we are focusing our ARPA funds, of which we're receiving $76 million. We received the first half this past summer, and we'll receive the second half in June. We are processing those through a revenue replacement formula and then directing those funds towards capital projects, which is much easier to manage. The record keeping for the departments and finance staff is much easier, and will be much easier to audit as well. So our lesson from the stimulus funds was keep it simple is better. I do give us grace because with CARES funds, it was, none of us had ever had that much money to spend in that short of time, and the rules were changing, and we did our best. And hindsight is 2020. Now, really briefly, the next aspect of the impact of the pandemic is we were, like all of us, pushed into the world of telework in spring of 2020 when the pandemic hit. And I think, like most of local governments, in our workforce of 3,500, there was not a lot of telework going on. It wasn't really an accepted part of our culture and norms, and it now is. And one of my focuses for our work in local government is, in order to get good results, we need excellent relationships with each other, with the community, with our customers. And I personally feel that it's very hard to build good relationships through a computer screen. And I have been looking forward to the end of telework or less telework. And what we're learning is both the workforce, the employees, are wanting to continue a high level of telework. Candidates that we are recruiting for jobs are expecting that. And we have actually lost some employees to positions that offer 100% telework. This has been an issue on our procurement team. That department is a team of 12, and we are realizing that to retain the talent and attract the talent, we are going to need to offer more telework than we expected. And we're still figuring that out. A funny story, we were writing some new norms for the procurement team. The city has a standard bureaucratic form that HR created for telework, but we wanted to create some norms for the procurement team. And I wanted to put a requirement in that if there was like a birthday gathering or a lunch gathering, that people be required to come in person. And I looked at the procurement director and said, is it bad to like mandate fun in person? And he said, probably yes. But he did indicate that he thought that people would show up. So it's those types of things that we're figuring out now. And it's a bit of an experiment to see what the impact of telework will be on team building, on onboarding new employees and building those relationships. So those are my comments. I think I exceeded the 5 minutes. Pardon that, I will stop talking.
Yeah, thank you, Laura, excellent. Brian, go ahead, looking forward to your remarks. I think you're muted there, Brian.
There you go, thank you. Appreciate y'all having me this morning. I'm gonna try to share a screen. I've got a quick little PowerPoint. Let me see if I can get this to work. Can you see that?
Yes, yes, we can, Brian.
Okay, yeah, this is, so it's always hard to follow Laura. She does such a great job with her presentation. So I've got a short little presentation I'm gonna try to give you and put this together relatively quickly. Being a small town, we didn't have as some of the issues that Laura described being in a bigger city, but just to give you a little overview of Crewe, just to let you know where we're at. You may have probably never heard of it. Crewe, we're about 2.2 square miles. We have about 2,400 residents in the town. We've got 31 budgeted positions. We're located alongside Route 460 in Nottoway County. We're about an hour south of Richmond. We have a very small general fund budget of $5 million, which is general fund, water fund, sewer fund, and cemetery fund. So very small budget. very few employees, very small population. Pandemic impacts, I was kind of surprised. I worked in larger localities before, but for the most part, we didn't really see any major budgetary impacts. Revenues stayed pretty constant. Meals tax stayed constant and went up a little bit. Sales tax was constant. We saw a little dip in cigarette tax, but we're really not sure what that was about. BPOL, property tax, relatively stayed stable. We did see a little bit of dip in our water and sewer sanitation bill payments, but that's to be expected. That's the one bill people are not going to pay if they don't have the money to do so. But overall, pretty stable revenues during the pandemic. CARES Act funding, given the fact that Crewe is a town, we did not get direct allocations like the counties and cities did. So we had to go through the county for approvals and reimbursements. So we put in several requests to the county. One of the big things we wanted to do was do adaptations and renovations to our town hall for more social distancing. We have for a small town, we've got a pretty nice town hall. It's a building that was built in 1940. It's 2-story, but the second floor is not utilized at all. It's just basically junk and files sitting upstairs. So everybody's pretty packed in tight on the first floor, and we also share the first floor with our police department. So what we wanted to do was create a new conference room area. Currently, the town hall does not have a conference area. Basically, my office, I have a small table that basically serves as our conference area, which creates issues with social distancing. We wanted to put in new staff offices to create spacing between staff located. We have, like I said, staff is very packed into particularly one room, and it creates issues with social distancing and people being exposed to the virus. We did include a request for architectural and construction costs. However, the county did not approve the request. We're really not sure why. They didn't give a good explanation. But in a lot of these, you'll see the county consulted with the Virginia Department of Treasury, and they were very, they scrutinized the request hard, and I think they were a little they over scrutinized, I think, comparison to some of the ways I've seen counties and cities spend the money. I think this was well within the guidelines, but they said no. We also requested some adaptations and renovations to our police department for some social distancing. Particularly, we built some workstations that included protective barriers between the officers. That was a relatively small project money-wise, but that was approved by the county. We did some technology upgrades at Town Hall. The town here is in severe need of technology upgrades, and we're still doing those now. But we upgraded the internet, phones, our computer systems, to enhance remote work opportunities, to provide for Zoom meetings like we're doing today, better accommodate virtual meetings. So we're in the process of doing that. That's been pretty successful. We're getting a managed IT company to do our managed IT services going forward, which the town did not have before. So all steps in the right direction. We also requested the county, we have a very small airport here that we manage and run, but we have a manual fueling station. We wanted to put in a automated self-serve fueling station for the planes to fuel when they come in. And right now they have to come in, they fuel up and have to come to Town Hall and pay our town clerk for the purchase of the fuel. We wanted to get a self-serve gas station, but again, the county did not approve our request for whatever reason. Now, the big thing we did purchase community center that the town previously owned and then sold to a couple. We did purchase it back. That was around a little over $100,000, and we moved our council meetings there. And we have other public meetings there, and we do open it up for rent, where the citizens can rent that space for private functions. So that was our biggest use of funding. We were better able to social distance between council members, staff, and the public, and the county did approve that request. So that was a good thing. One of the cooler things we applied for a coronavirus grant through Department of Criminal Justice Services. We were funded for 2 years, $50,000 per year to fund that position and those activities. And we call it an outreach and resource coordinator position. That person, she's fantastic. She's great. She coordinates coronavirus response events. She coordinates vaccination events with the health department and different groups and gets the word out on those. She gets the word out on COVID response efforts. Anything COVID related, she puts on Facebook, website, mail, any way to get information out. She does our quarterly newsletters that we get information out on COVID and other town activities. That is a temporary part-time grant funded position, which ends this December, unfortunately. And we are looking at potentially trying to make that a permanent position going forward, more of a public information officer type position. So, that's one of the cool things we did get through to help mitigate COVID through this DCJS grant. Moving forward with ARPA funds, we're looking at upgrading our website to allow for online payments to reduce foot traffic in Town Hall. We're looking at upgrading our water meters to an AMI system. That's probably going to be somewhere around $750,000 to $1 million. We're looking at upgrading the town's water distribution system. And again, since the county didn't approve our first request, we're looking at possibly creating new offices upstairs to create social distancing, putting in touchless furnishings such as sinks, toilets, etc., and a conference room. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, a lot of good information there. Again, we'll save questions to the end. So Sam, you want to go ahead there next?
Good morning. It's always a pleasure to be with this group, and look forward to being part of the panelists. Laura and Brian, of course, have already done a very good job. I will have only a few comments. One thing is that when we went through COVID, there was not any playbooks for us to follow. And so we had to depend very heavily on our department heads and our health experts, et cetera, in order to come up with policies and procedures to not only continue to serve our residents, but also to protect our employees. And we did a lot of communication with our residents through social media, text alerts, et cetera. And they all were very appreciative of that. We did go to a lot of remote work. We did close down actually City Hall for several months, except for appointments only, and of course set up new websites or web addresses to do more business electronically. We spent a lot of our CARES money, which was actually administered by Jefferson County. Their county manager's office did an outstanding job of putting together the program and administering the funds to us. We're a town of only around 23,000. And Jefferson County has something like 37 cities within Jefferson County alone. We used a lot of our CARES money for PPE, technology upgrades, so we could do more, Zoom and team meetings. We also made some structural changes to several of our buildings in order to protect the public as well as our workers. And we also used some of our money for just police and fire salaries. But we were, again, very pleased with what the way the county administered the funds. We really haven't had a lot of issues with retention, which we're very grateful, but we did try to make sure that we were taking care of our employees during this time and offering certainly mental health and EAP services to our employees because of the stress and the uncertainty that all this brought. COVID obviously had good and bad effects. Some people did not handle COVID very well. It rained on their parade. It changed their lifestyle. It changed their way of life. And some people were angry and some people were unhappy and they were looking for somebody to blame, whether it be the city or the health department or the school system. And so we've had our distractors, I guess you'd say here. We had a small dip in sales taxes, although we've made a great recovery over the last year. We did notice a big uptick in liquor, beer, and wine tax. So apparently people were, as they were home, they were drinking a lot more. But as people were home and they were maybe more observant, they seemed to notice every cracked sidewalk, every head wall of a drainage area, or gutters that need to be repaired. So as a result, our Public Works Department has a very long laundry list of projects that they've been trying to catch up ever since the pandemic. And also waste management has been our garbage and trash service provider or vendor for many, many years. And we have always had pretty good service from waste management, but during the pandemic, they had their issues with COVID, people being out, because they also had some change in management. So we had some issues with our garbage service here in Mount Brooke, and we put several of our public works employees actually collecting garbage at one time. And it hadn't been for their efforts in the city renting a garbage truck, we would probably have had a public health crisis at one time here on our hands here in Mount Brooke. But anyway, we're very proud of our employees and our mayor and council, department heads, how everybody pulled together, made it a team effort, and we feel like that we're better prepared now if we face this situation again in its magnitude of last year.
Thank you, Sam. Very good, very insightful. And last but not least, Dr. Daley.
Thank you, sir. Having been to Mountain Brook, I am shocked to find that anybody could find a cracked sidewalk in that town. He has done such a marvelous job down there.
Good.
I do not have a PowerPoint. I didn't have Brian here to show me how to do it, so we're going to have to go without it. I looked at this a bit different. To me, this is a perfect storm. And it's a perfect storm because we started out in 2020, or rather 2016, we started doing tariffs and we started doing tax cuts. 2020, we suddenly come into CARES. And when we had CARES, then there's all this more money flowing from our friendly federal government. And that money then pushes things beyond again. And I'm going to come back to this point as to why I think this is the perfect storm. I think one of the things we have to do with COVID is learn to live with it. Our mission is public service. Or is it employee safety? Or is it concern for the individual rights? And I think those three compete. When you work behind closed doors or at home, you can do your job, but you can't interact with the public in the same manner that you do. So throughout the last 2 years, if we need a permit from the State Department of Environmental Quality, we used to be able to go to the office and speak with someone, and they would review our plan and say, well, you need to change this or change that, and so forth. Now, our reviewers work at home. So we submit the plans in the office. The reviewers come in once a week to pick up the plans, take them home, bring them back a week later with comments, and we can pick them up and resubmit. Instead of what was taking 3 weeks is now 4 to 6 months. Hello to your friendly local health department. Now, they have always been over here on the side, and they were part of emergency preparedness, and our hospital was part of emergency preparedness, but they were secondary. They were not the prime movers. 5 years ago, 7 years ago, Sam and I were asked about writing a chapter in a local government book on emergency preparedness. Fortunately, neither of us did it because we would have missed this entirely, the idea of this COVID. And we've always had fire and rescue becoming EMS, but never had them focused almost entirely on emergency medical service. So when we look beyond COVID, we have to think outside the box of what these future crises are going to be. And when we look beyond COVID, we have to think about how we do business. We are teleconferencing. And one of the items for the members to consider is, should the annual meeting be in person? I can talk to my attorneys in Richmond. I can bring them here, and there are 2 of them who travel together. And it will cost me $1,400 for them to go back and forth. Or I can have them on the screen for $700. So instead of my total costing me about $2,100, it costs me $700. If I can telecommute VLGMA in Virginia Beach in the spring, I can save $300 a night in costs at the motel. And I lose that personal interaction, which I think is important. But there's a balance between, I can send a whole lot more people to teleconferencing than I can to sending them to the conference directly. But then they don't get all the personal contacts. And you don't get to stand out in the hall and talk. Brian had to come all the way up to here just so we could talk and have lunch. And that was a 2-hour trip. We look at coming back to our perfect storm. During COVID, with the CARES Act, we were able to do all these awesome things that weren't planned in the budget. In the case of Warren County, we had $7 million, and we gave $2 million to our town. We gave $2 million to various businesses who applied for it and made up why they were desperate and so forth. And then we used $2 million for our county employees. We gave $1,000 bonuses. We gave raises. We bought extra things for our departments. And those have all created expectations. So we're already talking this year, well, how are we going to do employee bonuses? ARPA money, the new CARES Act, says we can use that for public safety. But you have to be in special categories. And our friendly state governments down there, they're going to pass out money to our constitutional officers and their employees. And so the other county employees, they sit around in a big pile circle here and say, well, what about us, Board of Supervisors? So that's going to come now from our budget. Chief called me the other day, fire truck broke down, took it out of service. He can't buy or borrow a replacement truck. We used to, right now, if we buy a truck, new truck, which we have ordered, it's 18 months. If I buy a vehicle, sheriff's vehicles, they're 4 months. And the price is just going on a very sharp curve. As we look at our budget, everyone says, well, what's your contingency for fuel? And my suggestion is that they do more walk has not gotten much support there. They think they need to keep these vehicles going, and particularly out in the county rural, I can't tell them to just walk down Main Street. So we face more supplies. We face post-COVID, we face a huge age of fake news. We have changing pandemic in a changing political climate. The federal government says one thing, the state says something else. So the local government, we have to sit there and think about, well, who are we going to follow? And then we change national elections, and in Virginia, state elections. So now they're reversed. And it used to be that the FDC and the CDC, they were the gospel when it came to any health issue. And if the CDC said you needed this or you needed that, you automatically did it because you knew that's what you needed. And now we cannot rely on them. And we're coming out of COVID. It's done. Whoops, it's coming back. It's coming back in a new form in Europe, and we'll have to see what that means over here. And let me close with just 3 suggestions. Take a look at the Washington Post magazine, if you can find it, for March 6th, has an awesome story on the lessons of COVID for individuals. And they fit right in to local governments and everywhere else. And second, take your new issue of PAR. There's a very good article in there on COVID that tells you what to look at. And we'll get to talk about Dr. King's article this afternoon. Third is a book I found, Beyond COVID, and it's written from a healthcare system, not medical per se, as much as it is healthcare plural. And it's Beyond the COVID-19 Pandemic. And I can send the citation to anyone, but it's got some fascinating projections on what is coming for the future. And as we continue to politicize all healthcare and everything else, I'll turn it back to Dr. Roberts. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Daly. Well, first of all, we've heard from 4 outstanding public administrators. I think it's no accident that they reported generally that their communities have managed it well, because it takes leadership from the top. So this is the time for questions. You can chat it in the chat box, or you want to raise your hand. Either way, your questions are welcome. If we don't see any questions immediately, I have a general question for each of the panelists members. My question is that, as you mentioned, Dr. Daly, this COVID outbreak has affected us all intimately, personally and professionally. So how has COVID changed the way that each of you manage? How is this COVID, the experience of it personally, professionally, how has it changed the way that you've looked at management and leadership for your particular municipalities? So we can just go in order again. Laura, why don't you go ahead?
That's a great question. Thank you. The experience of leading through COVID, it has just emphasized the importance of being sensitive and empathetic to the perspective of others. And what really drove that home to me in COVID is I didn't have a particularly high level personally of COVID fear. And that might be due to my own personal health factors and the fact that I don't live in a household with anybody with those factors. and I'm not over age 65, things like that. And what COVID really reminded me of is that every employee, every person on the team, the people that I directly supervise, they have all different levels of COVID fear. And you really need to be sensitive to that. And the people that they lead have different levels. And that fed into telework protocols. So it was a great reminder of how important it is to put yourself in the shoes of other people. And then what was the other thing that was in my brain? And then I just forgot. So putting yourself in the shoes of other people. And also just another thing that I have reflected on in terms of leadership and workplace norms. I believe in the United States, in society, we have a very martyristic approach to coming to work when sick.
Yeah.
And I think a wonderful side effect of COVID is that it's no longer acceptable to come to work sick. And if you have a cold or a mild flu, but maybe you're able to work, you can stay home and not spread your germs. I have had bosses in my past who really would give you a hard time about using sick leave. And even if it was joking, like it was kind of like not really acceptable to use sick leave. So I think also that's a good side effect that feeds into leadership as well. Though I always encourage people to use their sick leave when they're sick. Thank you.
Yeah, presenteeism was a huge problem, but it's reduced. Thank you. How about you, Brian? How's the COVID just sort of affected you?
Yeah, they were all good points by Laura, and I agree with a lot of what she said. Laura mentioned that she wasn't really that concerned with COVID. I'm kind of the same. I mean, I took it seriously, but wore a mask and that you had to. But I think being sensitive to, like Laura said, how others feel about COVID or any kind of sickness, and being empathetic to them is something I've learned as well. And also being more adaptable and flexible. We've had, just like everybody else, we've had staff out with COVID, and trying to figure out how to get the work done the best way possible, especially with limited staff that we have. We have very few administrative staff here, so just trying to be more adaptable and flexible and go with the flow, and less structured, which is my tendency, to try to get the work done. And also, we closed town hall for a good while too, and trying to think about how to be more open with citizens and better communicate and reach out to citizens going forward is probably something I've thought about over this time period too. So that's kind of my lessons learned.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Insight. How about you, Sam?
Oh, one thing I found out during the pandemic, or actually three things. One is communications. Not only with your staff and your employees, but also your citizens about what's going on, what's the next steps, where are we headed. Two, I think I've always considered myself to be an encourager, but I knew that during this time period I need to be doing even more and making sure that, although we did limit our exposure to people, and even though when City Hall was closed, I was here every day at the office, but trying to encourage our people and keep their spirits high, because again, it was all uncertainty. I personally, did not have a lot of fear of COVID, but I took common sense approach. I would wear a mask, I'd wash my hands, I would certainly try to limit my exposure to other people as much as possible. But anyway, during this time period, again, it was so uncertain. We didn't really know where all this was headed. And the communication between our department heads and our health experts and our mayor council, I think, went a long ways in putting our policies into effect and communicating those policies very clearly to our staff as well as our residents. Trying to be the good example by being at work every day, despite City Hall being closed for several months. as much as possible, either by emails or phone calls or by Zoom, to try to uplift and encourage our employees and department heads to continue the high quality of work that is expected of us here. And thanks to the good Lord, we made it through it.
Thank you, Sam. Very insightful. How about you, Ed?
Well, lots of individual employee HR type stories in there, Gary. One small office called over the weekend, called the HR director, who called me because one of the employees had been in the office without her mask on, and she had contacted, her sister had contacted COVID. So the other employee was very upset and wanted something done about this now, etc. So we took care of that. And a couple of months later, the other employee came down with her housemate had COVID, and she came to work without her mask.
Mhm.
And the HR director said, weren't you complaining about Christine doing this the last time? And the response was, yes, isn't it funny? And so there are a whole lot more of these things of where the shoe is sitting right now that happens in there. And I go back to the idea that there's a balance between public service and the employee protection and employee rights. And employees want to be protected. A lot of employees would like to stay home. They enjoy working from home and only come in when it's convenient, when there's a social event or something that they might miss. And the opposite of that is the fact that we need them at work to be serving the public.
Yeah, thank you. And I think one of the things that links the presentations together, irrespective of our personal fear or concerns about COVID, as public administrators, as servant leaders, we have to be empathetic. We need to understand, and we need to be encouraging, and also set proper boundaries, at the same time be flexible. So that, I think, that reinforces the general practices of good leadership. Any other questions? I mean, I got at least one other question. We got a few more minutes from the audience. Sam, I think you're muted if you're trying to make a comment.
I would say just to reinforce what you just said, is that during this time, I think as leaders, you need to have a lot of empathy. Although maybe most of us did not get COVID, we know people who did, and we know people who went through it. My assistant got it twice. First time we didn't even know she had it, and apparently he's only sick a couple of days. But but you need to have a lot of empathy, because we know people who lost loved ones or lost spouses during this time, who were city employees or who had it and struggled with it mightily for several weeks or whatever. So I think you've got to have a lot of empathy for those people who did go through the hardships of that disease, and then also some people who actually lost close loved ones to this dreaded disease.
Yeah, so true. Again, we can never lose sight of the human factor, and that is so vital, for us as human beings and as public administrators. So I guess just to wrap this up, if there are no other questions, I kind of like to do kind of like a speed sort of closing for each one of you. Give you each one of you like 15 seconds or so. And again, any recommendations, takeaways, related to how public administrators and your governments are going to do better in the future with this. So we can, again, just any words of wisdom, beginning with Laura.
15 seconds, words of wisdom. Just
Maybe
like
30 seconds,
pre-COVID, just like pre-COVID, it's really important that we're nimble coming at the end of COVID and post-COVID, and open-minded. I shared some of my personal struggles with telework, because I think those relationships happen in person, and I really am having to look at that differently because it's impacting recruitment and retention. So coaching myself and coaching others, we need to be nimble and open-minded as always.
Thank you. Very good. Good there, Brian.
Yeah, just to recap again, I just like Laura said, I think we need to focus on being flexible, nimble, adaptable going forward. You know, when we deal with any situation, obviously you have to be adaptable as much as possible, communicating with employees. I don't have an HR department here. I am the HR department. So, you know, I've had to have several meetings with employees to explain policies and procedures, how to use their sick leave. So keep that in the front of your mind. Communication with employees is always important. And like Ed said, balancing in the future, these virtual meetings versus in-person meetings, and not losing touch with your colleagues and citizens, and balancing that going forward. I really think that primarily, that's one of the main takeaways, I think, is how you balance virtual versus in-person and budget, and those dynamics moving forward. So we'll see.
Thank you, Brian. Sam?
As Dr. Daley said, you know, we're public servants and we're here to provide a service, but at the same time, we've got to protect our employees, and there's a fine balance there. My philosophy has always been, if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of your customers. And so we've always tried to, you know, err on the side of keeping our employees happy and safe and satisfied, because in turn, they go the extra mile, and we are very pleased, you know, with our citizen survey results. And so I think you've got to bridge that. You want to continue to provide the good quality service and access as much as possible, but at the same time, you've got to make sure that you are adequately protecting your employees, and you're trying to meet their needs, not only you know, physically, but also mentally during this time of great stress.
Thank you, Sam. Very insightful. Ed, go ahead.
I would take Laura's be nimble or flexible with that again. Expect something's going to be different. And the other thing I would say with that is build relationships, because you never know when. You can't just keep your health department and your hospital over in the corner there as part of your EMS program, your emergency management. You've got to let them be a full player and respect their opinions and get them involved, because you never know when you're going to turn around and need them. You don't know when this is going to happen again. We may have Omicron X in 6 months.
Yeah, very good. Well, first of all, I want to thank our outstanding panelists, Laura, Brian, Ed, and Sam, for their insight. And your municipalities are in good hands. So we thank you for your public service and your good work. Just give them a round of applause. And thank you very much. I think we're finished here. Marina?
Thank you so much for such an insightful discussion. I'm sure we all can agree that we learned a lot from this roundtable.